Joining us today on the Ellis Martin Report and Money Talk Radio is Robert Rohlfing, CEO of Desert Mountain Energy, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange as DME and in the U.S. on the OTC as DMEHF. The company has established itself as a pioneer in helium and natural gas exploration, with its flagship focus now on New Mexico projects near Roswell, where Desert Mountain Energy is advancing production, AI-driven extraction technology, and long-term supply agreements. Robert, welcome back to the program. It's been a long time. Great to visit with you again.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that.
Robert, give our audience a background of who you are, where you've come from, and how you wound up founding Desert Mountain Energy, if you don't mind, sir.
Originally, I had many years ago, started back in the 90s, started my own companies for oil and gas in Oklahoma and drilled wells in Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas. I had my own drilling crews, my own drill rigs, workover rigs. So that's how I got into it. And then in 99, I had a friend of mine who had put money into what was supposed to be an oil well in Arizona. And Arizona is not known as an oil province or anything like that. And came out, what they had found was helium. What they found, they didn't even see that. They just knew they had lost control of a well and it was blowing gas. And so I checked into it after I got it killed and everything else, found out that it was basically nitrogen with helium. So that started me on the journey of trying to understand why helium in Arizona and New Mexico, where is it found there? You know, there's a lot of helium was known for out of the Hugoton gas field in southwest Kansas and northwest Oklahoma going in Texas and north of Amarillo. That's kind of what that province was known for. At that time, natural gas was so-so on pricing and helium was very cheap. The United States government decided to officially get out of the helium business, and they got out in 2018. Pricing on helium went from $70 per thousand at that point. It went to $270, $280 for crude. And so it's a mixture, anywhere from 60 to 80%, nothing really overly great. That just really sparked my interest more to come back into Arizona on what really geologically is required. Most people think that all of the helium comes out of fractures in the earth. I think we've proven up in other places that's not necessarily true. We've found exactly where different geologic settings and mineral depositions that have occurred. We have found hydrogen and helium being generated as we speak. So that's kind of how we got into that. And now the current pricing on helium, it varies. It's not a published market like Henry Hub for nat gas or for West Texas Intermediate or for oil. So it's very opaque, to say the least. And it can vary $200 or $300 per MCF on any given day during any given week. So currently, slightly enriched helium as of yesterday was going for $587 per MCF. 5 9s and a 5 was going for $718. And that can vary. Last week it was $697. Week before it was $800 and some. So it varies, but there's a market niche for it. And New Mexico, there's helium known about in the northwest part of the state, but down by Roswell is what was intriguing because they have also a little known another helium isotope, helium-3. So you have regular helium-4 and helium-3. Helium-3 is a hydrogen isotope. It's stable, but it's in the form of helium. And what that's used for is specifically more for specialty lasers or for people who have been through an airport, the backscatter machines. They use it for looking at shipment coming in through containers, through the different ports, or coming across in trains. So you can look for different things inside that. So it's a very unique helium isotope, and it's very expensive. Basically, a 1 liter bottle of that currently is now $2,750 for a 1 liter bottle. It's about $20 million per kilogram.
And that's because it's pretty rare.
It basically, the entire helium-3 supply is generated at the Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility in Georgia. That's it. By congressional edict, only the federal government can strip it and refine. You can collect it like what we could collect in addition as a very sub part of helium, but it's interesting. So what we had found early on, there are some studies that had been done on helium and specifically helium-3 starting back during 1942-43. They were looking at different things, and that had to do with the Manhattan Project in New Mexico. So how that has transformed over the year, where people have drilled specifically more for nat gas, and it's just a byproduct. The helium is a byproduct. But what we were looking for is, where does that occur? It came to be that there's a trend of it just north of Roswell, along with natural gas.
I spent almost 20 years in New Mexico in radio, and we just saw each other there a week ago, and we're going to visit again in another week or so. When you and I first met 4 or 5 years ago, we were not talking about New Mexico at all. What happened?
Issues with the state of Arizona in trying to do flow enhancements on wells and to try to do what type of things. The state of Arizona, to give you an idea, when we first started looking to go there for helium, their entire oil and gas personnel for the state was one person. That's it. And now it's 3. And the rules and regulations, like you look at Texas or Oklahoma or New Mexico, you have anywhere from 1,800 to 2,700 pages of regulations. It's very in-depth. Arizona was 16 pages. And how you get into it, and then depending on who's in charge at any given time, it's just people are not familiar with what's required. And it doesn't make them bad folks. They just don't know. But if you have a big changeover, quote unquote, in that single manager or in the management thereof, and you do that 8 or 9 times in 7 or 8 years, you lose continuity. So we had to move because we had made the investment, drilled successfully 8 wells in a row in Arizona, had built the world's first solar-powered helium extraction unit, and the plant we built was modular in design, and it was built to operate in a nitrogen environment, which is what Arizona is. There's very fractional amount of natural gas. So to utilize that, while the state was defining how to make the rules and regulation, we decided to move the plant to north of Roswell. And so what we did, we picked up an existing lease that we had been studying. There was just under 190 wells across 77,000 acres that were very favorable royalty rate, very favorable. It wasn't like some of the Permian Basin. You can get into 35 and 40% royalty rates. You just don't have that yet, average 15%. So that helps add to the bottom line for the shareholders long term. And that's why we moved there. The other aspect of when we originally, in 2008, when I did the first design work on a helium extraction plant, it was going to take 4 megawatts of power. The final version we built requires 320 kilowatts. It's just so much more cost effective, and it runs on AI. It decreases the amount of personnel you have to have. A lot of people think that when you have a gas well, it just flows and it's the same amount and it's the same gaseous composition constantly. It isn't, and it varies. On any given day, one well will produce more than another. Well, if you're trying to extract a very finite resource, just over 1% or just under, that's pretty tough. And you would have to have someone sitting there constantly watching a mass spectrometer and make changes to a very complex plant. Well, over about 2 years, we ended up with 2.5 terabytes of information. And we changed that to an AI-powered extraction plant. So it decreases drastically the number of people you have, the efficiency of it, and because we run on natural gas, the way the royalties were set up, as long as we were using that natural gas on site to process gas, like to strip out helium, we're not subject to royalties.
About 4 years ago, your stock hit about $3.80, and I was part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I invested at the time. I did well. A lot of people did well. And it was really based on the Arizona story. There were really no other factors involved on the Arizona helium story, which was a great story. And then, like you mentioned earlier, the company ran into trouble with a few people at the state level and at the local level in Flagstaff. And it was terrible for the market for DME. Everybody left. A lot of folks left. Now, you would expect that with the float of about 90 million shares, and you were, I think, 70 or 80 at the time, 70 or 80 million shares about 4 or 5 years ago, and a share price now of about 18 cents, that maybe you had 200 or 300 or 400 million shares in the float, but you don't. And since everybody's left, and very few people, at least in the public market, have heard about this amazing New Mexico story, which is better than Arizona, in my opinion, much better. And, we're 5 years down the road and we're involved in an AI data campus in the Roswell area, that this potentially could be a real opportunity, especially considering the fact that the field that you mentioned has a capacity for another 70 to 100 new wells. It's a great opportunity potentially, and we're both biased. Invest at your own risk, but I see nothing but potential upside here.
Well, one of the things that, full disclosure, I was not with this company when it was originally formed, so I got no free shares. I got no founder shares. Every share that I own, I purchased out of the market. That's a little bit different for a lot of folk in some companies. And I've never sold a single share, even though hindsight being perfect, I should have sold some when it was real high. And I didn't, because I believed in the company and what I'm trying to do. And then when you mix in now where we're at going forward with having signed in July for a data center, it gives us a market somewhere to go with our natural gas long term. Short term, we go into a pipeline. Long term, what we've discussed with them is that they will take care of all of our nat gas. They will purchase it all, basically for the life of the field. So it locks us in. So you get away from a lot of transportation costs and getting dinged really bad. It's a significant part of that. And then our other aspect of dealing with the data center is we're going to be operating their inbound gas supply. So we're helping them secure unending supply of nat gas, hopefully. And we get a percentage of that for very little infrastructure. We're not having to build 200 miles of pipeline. We helped them select a site that there's 2 pipelines going across their property, 36 and a 24-inch pipeline. They are going to end up needing a lot of nat gas by the time a 5-year build out is completed.
5 years ago, we didn't have this AI data campus, and now it's all that anyone is really talking about. And I know that there's a lot of investment into AI from Northern California, from Silicon Valley, from down here in Southern California, from all over the world, Texas, Middle East, and you're on top of it. And the offtake is taken care of.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't have to shop around for someone to buy the gas.
No, so between the nat gas being taken care of long term and the helium, well, who's the purchasers in New Mexico? Let's start White Sands Missile Range. Number 2, Sandia National Labs. Number 3, Los Alamos National Lab. Any one of those buys more than what if we drilled or did an acquisition of 400 wells that were all at 0.5% helium. It would outstrip what we could supply for them forever. So it's like we don't have to go anywhere. Trucking is not an issue. The pipeline's there. The data center has asked us to build a underground natural gas storage unit for them. We're doing the engineering on that now. Data centers the lights can't flicker. They cannot lose power ever. And they've asked us to, and we've identified an area of salt at depth, quite a depth, that we are doing the engineering work on to possibly give them that 3 billion cubic feet of natural gas storage backup, which would only be 5 days supply for them fully built out at 4 gigawatts of power.
But certainly they're not going to be offline for 5 days ever, we don't think.
No, they can't afford it. You can't be off 30 seconds.
So you've got to be in talks with the Department of Defense right now, right? Or no comment? Let's talk about money, revenue. What is the revenue predictability and growth for the coming 2 to 5 years? What do those numbers look like?
Depending on, it would be a combination of 2 things. Well, actually 3. Besides the helium, being number one. Number two, you have natural gas sales from our West Pecos field. Then you have us doing a handling fee on all the natural gas going to the Roswell information part. If you just take a combination of just any one of those, just starting with, just call me Mr. 5%. If we get just 10 cents an MCF or 5 cents an MCF for all the gas that goes into an information part, 5 years from now, you're looking at somewhere between, depending on the price, if you use $3.50 per MCF, it gets up to nearly $100 million per year, just off of basically a management fee for nat gas. That's one aspect. Now, the ultra low end, we just sell natural gas to them, and we get them, instead of 724 million cubic feet of nat gas a day, they only get 20 million. Well, then it's only worth about 46 to 54 million per year. Just the nat gas right there in Roswell.
Beyond New Mexico, and I'm excited about this because we've talked about it offline, you're advancing helium hydrogen projects in Arizona. You're not done there, and you're expanding into the UK. How do these global levers complement the Roswell strategy, Rob?
The deal in the UK came about because of the way we chose to drill and complete wells in Arizona. We don't just go by the very most basic of rules. We went by a way it costs 28 to 30% more to the redundancy of the casing, multiple strings of casing, cemented all the way back to the surface, not just putting in a little drabble of cement over a few hundred feet. We make sure it goes all the way back to the surface, so we are protecting all of the aquifers. And that's key. That is key when you're in the desert. You have to protect the aquifers. So we chose to do that free will. The regulations didn't say we had to, but that's the way we chose to do business. What that has now come about, we were invited to look at a place in the UK, in Devon, by a very interesting large land and mineral owner, and people can do their own research. I am precluded by contract of saying who exactly signed that contract, but he is very well known in the UK.
Probably the largest landowner in the UK, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do your own research.
And because of the sensitivity of the area where they're looking at, compared with what we did in Arizona, for free will to protect everything. The other thing that about Arizona, we drilled 8 wells to varying degrees of success, but we found hydrogen, helium in every well. No one else has done that. Well, you don't just walk out and start popping holes 70 miles apart and have that kind of luck. Obviously, from 1999, when I first started, in a lot of walking around geology and trying to understand geologic settings and how it can happen, how it is, it's a combination of things, along with harmonics and seismic, very low grade seismic activity, where you can get things to work. That number one, you're not dealing with a bunch of salt water. Number two, you're not dealing with a lot of CO2. You're dealing with nitrogen, so it's a lot easier. And we found hydrogen, which is getting back to New Mexico momentarily. The data center folks, they're trying to do an all-inclusive. They want solar, they want nat gas. Eventually, 10, 15 years out, they probably will have some form of nuclear. And to make a thorium reactor work, you need He3. Just a fact. You got to have that with the thorium. The other thing is we have also identified a fairway for hydrogen, where there are actual hydrogen areas that have produced hydrogen and natural gas up to 48 or 50% hydrogen since the late 70s. So we know that we've identified a swath, I'll just say, and it extends for many miles, tens of miles. So how we can get into that fairway and help. Now, that's one of the things the UK is very hot and heavy on, is hydrogen. They're trying to make hydrogen from salt water, from water, any form, and using offshore wind and everything, but hydrocarbons. So how do you do this? We came up with a way that we had, based on our results in Arizona and what we found in New Mexico, where to go with this. And there's 4 specific areas in the UK we identified to be highly prospective, and a certain individual went along with it.
And we'll leave it at that for now. We've got room for one final question. We're not going to talk about that certain individual anymore, at least today, but in the future, I hope we will get that out of you. What's the one thing you believe the market still underestimates about Desert Mountain Energy's New Mexico potential?
They just don't understand the overall between the helium and the natural gas. When we put in our natural gas power generation units there, since we had time in between and we knew there's newer regs coming out, we put in the top of the line scrubbers. So we don't just barely get under the wire on emissions. We're running way down there in the 40 to 60% range, depending on which well's feeding. So we have gone out of our way to make sure that we were good stewards of the money, to make sure we could do things in an environmentally as responsible manner as possible. And that lowers the overall operating costs. To give you an idea, our actual power generation cost is 0.8 of 1 cent per kilowatt. So it's 0.00831. That is cheap. Now, that adds to everything. It's the long term. And I think that's where, and people who aren't in the natural gas business or in the oil and gas just in general, and doesn't make them bad folks, they just aren't familiar with it. You can find there's a lot of people out there who operate natural gas and they don't do it cost effectively. They don't operate the wells correctly. They don't operate them in a systematic manner. They don't do it with long term. They do it for a very short term. Let's just make a quick buck and get out. I'm building something, what we've put together here, the team, it's something to run for decades. This is not a flash in the pan. And sometimes those type of deals take a little bit longer, and people, if they're focused on instant short-term returns, it may not be their cup of tea. But when it gets close to it, then they see, oh, wait a minute, these guys are real. They were thinking before things went awry in Arizona, they had actually already started looking at this. So it's like, what all have they looked at? So it's the hidden gem. It's not just one given thing.
More conversation in the future. Thank you so much for this update. And Rob, it's been great catching up with you. I look forward to visiting with you in New Mexico in the very near future. Thank you so much.
Ellis, you have a great day.
I've been speaking with Robert Rohlfing, CEO of Desert Mountain Energy Corporation, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange as DME and the U.S. on the OTC as DMEHF. With helium and natural gas projects in New Mexico, including offtake agreements tied to Roswell's growing AI data campus, Desert Mountain Energy is positioning itself as a long-term supplier of critical energy and industrial gases. Go to the company's website, desertmountainenergy.com. This is the Ellis Martin Report and Money Talk Radio. Desert Mountain Energy is a paid sponsor of the Ellis Martin Report.